Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something kind of sneaky that lurks in a lot of technical documents, especially in fields like manufacturing and medical devices.
We're talking about these, linguistic vampires, you could say, things that just suck the clarity right out of instructions.
Right, they're called nominalisations, but maybe a more vivid term is zombie nouns.
Exactly. These abstract words, they turn clear actions into these heavy, vague concepts, and that really ramps up the cognitive load for the reader.
Which is a huge problem when you're talking about complex machinery or, life-critical medical equipment. Errors there are just not an option.
Absolutely. Cognitive fatigue leads to mistakes. Simple as that.
So our mission today, really, is to dig into how these abstractions undermine safety and efficiency. We'll be looking at technical docs, some expert views, standards.
And crucially, we want to explore the solution, the internationally recognized fix, Simplified Technical English, or ASD STE 100.
Yeah, the goal for you listening is to get some really actionable knowledge, how to spot this problem, and how to use STE to make your own documentation, just better, more accurate, more reliable.
Verifiable even, especially for a global audience. So let's jump in.
Okay, so these nominalisations, or zombie nouns, the source material we looked at uses some pretty strong language to describe what they do.
It does. It talks about them cannibalizing active verbs, sucking the lifeblood from adjectives.
And replacing actual people doing things with abstract ideas.
And that's the core danger, isn't it? You lose the actor, you lose the action, who is doing what, if that's not clear.
You get ambiguity. And ambiguity in technical settings means risk.
Big risk. And often it seems like these words creep in when someone's trying to sound, more formal or academic.
Instead of just being clear.
Yeah.
Here's that classic example, isn't there? It really hits home.
Oh, yeah. Listen to this mouthful. The proliferation of nominalizations in a discursive formation may be an indication of a tendency towards pomposity and abstraction.
Wow. Okay, my brain hurts already.
Right. It's got, 7 nominalizations? And it tells you almost nothing concrete. Who is doing what? It's just floating abstraction.
It makes you want to just put the manual down.
Exactly. But then you reanimate it, as the source says. You put the action back in.
How does that version go again?
It becomes, writers who overload their sentences with nominalizations tend to sound pompous and abstract.
Okay. Instantly clear. You know who the writers, you know what they're doing, overloading sentences. The fog just lifts.
And that speed of understanding in a high-stakes environment, that's not just nice to have, it's critical.
It reminds me of that George Orwell point the source brought up, how he took that really direct biblical verse.
Yeah, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. Very concrete nouns. Race, battle, swift, strong.
And then he deliberately rewrote it in that awful abstract style.
Right. His version was something like, objective considerations of contemporary phenomena compel the conclusion that success or failure. Just dreadful, vague stuff.
It's like the people just vanish from the writing.
Completely. And the sources warn that's when zombie nouns do the most damage when they cluster together in these jargon-generating packs. They swallow the verbs.
And suddenly, a complex but understandable idea becomes tedious, unclear, puts you right to sleep.
Which you absolutely cannot have when someone's trying to follow a procedure for, say, assembling a medical device or maintaining a production line.
Okay, so if abstraction and vagueness lead to errors and fatigue, how does something like Simplified Technical English actually fight back? How does it force clarity?
Well, STE is very systematic. It's disciplined. And it tackles this right at the word level. One of its most powerful tools against nominalization is the part of speech rule.
Part speech rule.
Okay. Basically, STE says technical nouns cannot be used as verbs, and approved verbs can't be used as nouns unless they're specifically approved as both. This single rule just cuts off a huge source of zombie nouns at the knees.
That sounds pretty strict. Does it ever make sentences feel, a bit clunky or longer than they need to be?
It can feel a bit longer initially, maybe, but the trade-off is eliminating ambiguity. That's always the priority in STE. Think about the word damage.
Okay, noun or verb in regular English.
Right. So in a non-STE doc, you might just write, be careful not to damage the sleeve. Quick, common.
Yeah.
But in STE, damage is only approved as a noun. So you must write, be careful not to cause damage to the sleeve.
I see. You're forced to use an explicit action verb, cause.
Exactly. The action is always clear. Another really common one is test.
Okay.
Test is an approved noun in STE, but it's not an approved verb. So you wouldn't write test the system for leaks.
Which sounds perfectly normal in everyday technical speak.
Totally normal. But STE makes you be precise about the action. You'd write, do the leak test of the system. Or maybe do a test for leaks in the system.
So you always have that clear verb, do. It forces that structure.
It does. And think about translation. That kind of structural consistency is gold. It prevents misinterpretation.
Makes sense. And STE has other structural rules too, right? To stop things getting too complex.
Yes, definitely. Rule 2.1 tackles multi-word nouns. This is about those long strings of nouns modifying each other that you see in engineering sometimes.
Oh yeah, the engine transmission housing attachment bolts kind of thing.
Exactly that. 5 words piled up. By the time you get to bolts, you're mentally backtracking to figure out what attaches to what STE says. Maximum 3 words for a technical noun, unless the longer term is specifically approved and listed in your dictionary.
So how would STE handle that bolts example?
It forces you to break it down and make the relationships clear. You'd write, remove the bolts that attach the transmission housing to the engine.
Okay, it's longer, but way less ambiguous. Especially, like you said, if English isn't your first language.
Precisely. Clarity trumps conciseness when ambiguity is the alternative. And this focus on clarity extends right into sentence structure, making sure the operator, the who, is always clear.
Right, the active voice stuff.
Exactly. Rules 3.6 and 5.3 are key here. For procedures, which is, most of a maintenance manual, you must use the imperative, the command form.
So set the switch to on-N.
Yes. Not the switch must be set to on-N or the operator sets the switch, just the direct command. And for descriptive text, it mandates active voice mostly. Passive is only okay if you genuinely don't know who performed the action. It keeps the focus on who does what.
And then there are the sentence length limits, which kind of put a hard structural cap on rambling.
That's the final layer of defense, really. Rule 5.1 says procedural steps, max 20 words. Rule 6.3, descriptive sentences, max 25 words.
20 words for a step, that's tight.
It is, but it forces you to break down complex actions into simple, manageable steps. If you can't explain it clearly in 20 words, the step is probably too complex anyway. It needs to be 2 steps. It structurally prevents wordiness and abstraction from creeping in.
Okay, so STE clearly brings a lot of rigor. He was born in aerospace, Boeing, Airbus, where, mistakes are unthinkable. But for our listeners in, say, automotive manufacturing or medical device production, why should they adopt this aerospace standard? How does it translate?
Well, the sources make a strong point that the risk profile isn't actually that different. A failure in critical medical equipment can have consequences just as severe as an aircraft.
Good point.
Any industry dealing with complex assembly procedures where errors have high costs or strict safety regulations really needs this level of clarity. It's not just an aerospace thing.
So it's adaptable outside of planes and rockets.
Very adaptable. The core vocabulary, about 930 words, is surprisingly general. The sources estimate maybe 90% of it is useful across almost all technical fields.
Really? 90%?
Yeah. There's even a case study mentioned where STE was used for manuals for high-end coffee machines. Admittedly, they were used on planes, but the point stands. The framework itself, the rules for clarity, they work everywhere.
Okay, let's talk brass tacks, the ROI. What's the business case for going through the effort of implementing STE?
2 big things stand out from the sources. First, direct cost savings. Because STE rules eliminate wordiness and redundancy, you typically see text volume shrink by 20, maybe 25%.
Wow, that much.
Yeah. And that shorter, highly standardized repetitive text makes translation vastly easier, faster, and cheaper. For global companies, that's a significant saving.
Okay, translation cost reduction, that's tangible. But you mentioned another benefit earlier. Something about accuracy.
Yes. And arguably, this is the most critical benefit. It's about technical rigor and validation.
How so?
In standard English technical writing, you often get the situation where a subject matter expert reviews a draft and kind of skims it, thinks, yeah, that looks about right, and signs off.
Happens all the time.
But the expert source we looked at emphasized that in STE, because the language is so precise and rule-based, there's no room for about right. It forces a much stricter review. Is the statement factually true or false? Is the instruction technically correct or incorrect?
So it eliminates that fuzzy middle ground.
Completely. It makes the validation process much more robust. It forces engineers and SMEs to confirm genuine accuracy, not just approximate correctness. That's huge for quality control and meeting regulatory demands.
So the standardization doesn't just cut translation bills. It actually helps ensure the technical information itself is right in the first place.
Precisely. It enforces verifiable clarity. which is invaluable.
So for the engineers, the technical writers listening, the big takeaway seems to be that structure really does equal safety and efficiency. Following these kinds of rules, moving away from abstract language.
It transforms documentation. You go from instructions that might invite errors to clear, unambiguous commands that actually improve how people perform tasks.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of discipline is needed, though.
It is discipline, but the experts in our sources actually argued it makes the job of technical writing more engaging, even more entertaining.
How so?
Because you can't just fill space with jargon anymore. You're forced to really understand the product, the process, and figure out how to communicate it with absolute clarity and conciseness using a restricted vocabulary. It's more of a puzzle, less like just typing. It demands more creativity in a way.
A different kind of skill, moving from just documenting to truly communicating effectively.
Exactly. It's about mastery, not just transcription.
Okay. So if you're listening and you're thinking, right, we need to get past this about right problem, we need this level of clarity and reliability, especially for global operations. There's a clear next step.
There is. Schufrin's Tech Docs is recognized worldwide as the leading authority on ASD SDE 100 training. If you're serious about getting your critical documentation right, accurate, verifiable, efficient, they are the people to talk to.
So head over to their website, check out the training options. It's about moving your team towards that standard of verifiable, concise clarity.
Definitely worth looking into if accuracy and safety are priorities.
And just one final thought to leave you with, something else from the source material. It notes how STE handles verb tenses. Complex forms like the present perfective, the operator has adjusted the linkage.
They're not approved.
Right. It simplifies them, usually to the simple past.
Yeah.
The operator adjusted the linkage.
Think about that. How much mental energy do we sometimes spend decoding those more complex tenses? Wondering, is the adjustment ongoing? Is it definitely complete? That simple past tense removes that layer of ambiguity, which can be crucial when you're following steps in sequence. Something to consider.